welcome to the You Need More Money podcast. I'm your host, Matt Manero, where I come to you each and every week from my studio in Dallas, Texas. It's another rainy day in Dallas. I cannot believe it. We've had like 30 days worth of rain. Literally, I think we've had one day of sunshine in the last 30 days. It's starting to drive me crazy. The only thing it's good for is that my pool is starting to get cold. When I went in my pool this morning, it was 62 degrees. So if some of you don't know, I do these cold water swims. I swim in my pool all year round. Last year, it got down to 43 degrees. Every morning I go in that pool because I saw David Goggins talk about it. David Goggins says you should suffer a little bit every day. Now, he suffers hours. I only suffer minutes. But let me tell you something. When you go out of that warm bed and I walk out into my patio this morning, it was raining, it was cold. It must have been like 40 degrees outside this morning. And you go into that pool, man, you suffer. It wakes you up and it says you've done something that most people haven't already done. And I just love it. That's about the only thing, it's the only lemonade I can make out of the lemons that the weather in Dallas has produced for the last 30 days. I have never experienced this amount of rain like we've had in Big D. But let's get to the point of the podcast. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8:45, I do a sales training session for my sales guys in an effort to just keep them inspired and getting better. Now, we've got so many training things. We have Cardone University, we have Coach Bert's Monster Producers, we have our company's CFF University, and I don't think you can train enough. But on Monday's training, I went through a process with my team of how to get focused, refocused, or unstuck. And it was so beneficial that I'm actually going to turn it into an ebook. And I'll end up giving that away to everybody free of charge of the process, the steps that we actually take people through to get them focused, refocused, and unstuck. And we'll end up doing lots of podcast episodes on it too. But one of those components is that you got to start fishing in the right pond, and that's what today's podcast is about. You're fishing in the wrong pond. You make success too damn difficult, and it eludes you because you're fishing in the wrong pond. Now, let me explain just a little bit further what I'm talking about. You go to crappy networking events. You hang out with the same crappy friends. You still go to the same crappy parties, and in business, you still work with the same crappy customers. If you ever read my book, The Grit, which you can download at mattmanero.com, it's free. You can get my book, The Grit, for free, the ebook version of it, it's free. And in the book, I talk about the three bears that fish for salmon in Alaska. And the third bear is the bear at the end of the stream, where they have to fight with the foxes and the seagulls and the rats, and they pick through the scraps of these eaten skeletons of salmon. And that's a perfect example of what it's like for most people when they are unfocused and they're stuck. It's because they're in the wrong pond. So today's episode is I want to give you some strategies that help you fish in the right pond again, the pond of success, the pond that gives you the greatest opportunity to win. So let's go through it just a little bit. A little bit of history. You got to think back 23 years ago when I started this company, Commercial Fleet, dumpy one-bedroom apartment with a phone and a folding table, and I was cold calling out of the yellow pages. Now, when you think of that, you might say, God, there's no pond to fish in right there, but you'd be wrong. Because I would have a Dallas Yellow Pages, and I'd have a Fort Worth Yellow Pages, and I have an Austin Yellow Pages, and a Houston Yellow Pages, and a San Antonio. Anytime I ever traveled and the dumpy hotels that I would stay in, I would steal the yellow pages out of the hotel because it gave me leads in that territory. And then for me at that time, I would go to the trucking section and I would start to cold call down the trucking companies or the construction companies or the towing companies in that marketplace. And while I didn't have great data, I didn't know who the decision maker was, I didn't know what the revenue of the company or the fleet size of the company was, it was still a fairly decent pond to fish in. What pond are you fishing in for your deals, for your business, for your money? How do you fish in the right pond? And the first way that you start to fish in the right pond is you go back and pull data on what your ideal customer looks like. So is it the last 10 deals? Is it the last 100 deals that you've done? Is it the last 50 deals? You need to go back and figure out what customers were the easiest customers for me to work with, provide value, and then extract value back to you in the form of revenue. You got to go figure out what your ideal customer looks like, because at Commercial Fleet, we've made it so easy for ourselves. Our ideal customer is what we call a 5-5-7. 5 years in business, 5 units in the fleet, and a 700 credit score. That's what we're looking for. Now, there's 3.5 million truckers in the United States, and we need to go and fish in that pond of 3.5 million truckers and search for 5-5-7s, because that is our ideal customer. Do you know what your ideal customer is? Have you spent the time analyzing your previous deals to figure out what your ideal customer actually looks like? That's the first step. That's what you got to do. Who was the easiest for you to do business with, to deliver value that they appreciated, and therefore extract revenue gen from that customer? You got to figure that out. The second thing you got to do is, once you've figured out what your ideal customer is, you got to go get those leads. There's so many ways to get those leads today. I told you how I used to do it out of Yellow Pages, and I'll tell you another story towards the end of this podcast. But you can get leads anywhere. You can go to InfoUSA or salesgenie.com and you can buy data of your exact ideal customer. You can figure out what the geography for that customer is. You can figure out what the revenue size of that customer is. It'll give you who the primary decision maker is and what their title is. It'll give you their email address and their full mailing address and their email address if you want it. It'll even give you their Dun & Bradstreet rating if you're looking for credit quality. You got to start spending some money to fish in the right pond. And how do you do it? You figure out what your ideal customer is, and then you go buy those leads. But what if I don't have any money, Matt? Everybody always tells me that. Let me tell you something. Go to LinkedIn. I can go to LinkedIn right now, this minute, and I can type in CEO Towing Dallas. And LinkedIn will give me a list of 30 or 40 people on LinkedIn who are CEOs of towing companies in Dallas. Sounds like a pretty good source of leads, right? How much did it cost me? Nothing. Are you using LinkedIn to fish in the right pond to go find these best leads? Are you really spending the time to figure out who do I want to do business with and where do they live? Now, the grittiest story of them all I can give you of how I fished in the right pond is a story that I told you before, and I got to tell you again. It's in the early days of Commercial Fleet when I had this old junky Suburban and I had a sign made. And the sign had 2 pieces of wood, 2 poles, and across the middle of it, it had a sign that said truck financing here with 2 arrows pointing down. And I would drive my old junky Suburban to truck stops all over Dallas and Fort Worth on Saturday and Sunday mornings, sometimes during the week early. And I would open up the 2 panel doors, and in the hinges, I would slide down those 2 poles. And I had it designed so that it stood up perfectly in those hinges, and I could sit on the back of my Suburban underneath the sign that said truck financing here, and truckers would come to me. I fished in the right pond. I fished where the truckers were. Because I was gritty, man. I was so damn desperate to figure out how do I put food on the table, which is a real component to that element of getting focused and refocused and unstuck. One of the things I talk about in the ebook, I think the ebook will be out maybe next week. We'll give you the link when it comes out next week for you to get it. And what I try to get the reader and my team, when I did this presentation to them, understand is sometimes to get focused or refocused or unstuck, you got to go back to the days where you were busted ass broke. And you got to look at it like, how would I put food on my table if my baby needed food or my baby needed medicine? How would I do it? Would you really be stuck? Would you really be unfocused and floating around and sort of disgruntled and frustrated? Hell no. You know what you'd be doing? You'd be freaking laser focused on how do I go into the market to extract revenue, to put food on the table and pay for my baby's medicine. Sometimes you just got to go back to the early days to remember what was it like to be so damn broke, and then you got to commit to never going back to it. You got to get gritty and tough and focused and fishing in the right pond. That's the message on the You Need More Money podcast today. Fish in the right pond, and it's never been easier to do it. So go out, get gritty, and get going. I'll see you down the road.